Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the student of the game. I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. And listen, if you're here, chances are you like talking sport, and we're glad you're going to do it here with us. And I tried to be the student of every game there is out there as the student of the game. No matter what the game is, I try to be a student of it. And I'm glad to bring all that action to you here tonight as we do this edition of the show. It's going to be a fun one here, talking a little bit of NBA and NFL offseason here. Of course, Ernest EJ Christian of Earnestly Speaking will be joining us at about 9:10 here this evening. And of course, we're jumping across the pond again to talk to Colum Cronin from the Irish NFL show. Stuff was going on with the Broncos. You might have heard of Russell Wilson getting released, and a lot of talk surrounding that and what they're going to do. And a lot, really, there's been so much talk of where Russell Wilson would go in the NFL, and rightly so. But I think there's not very much conversation about what you do with an $86 million dead cap in the basement there. So I explore that with Colum about what a franchise, what Sean Payton could do, and kind of the perfect storm that took place to get the Broncos there. It's a very fascinating thing. Along with the AFC West in general is fascinating, as a fascinating thing, and not just because of Patrick Mahomes II and the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, like I said, talk some NBA with EJ Christian. I'm curious to have a little bit of a talk forming here about who some of the NBA MVP favorites are, with injuries to certain players, certain newer faces coming on the scene. I'll be very curious to see what he has to say about that. But first, let's get into this. And I know I'm a little late to this particular topic as we close out the regular season in college basketball throughout the nation here. I know as I speak tonight, the black and gold bannerets, Nick Porcelli and Eric Lopez, are in Addition Financial Arena for the last home game there for senior night as they battle the number one team in the nation, Houston, the Houston Cougars there, another team that moved with them to the Big 12. That's a big deal there too. Last I saw at the half, UCF had a lead and is battling to try to get the vengeance of the loss in Houston earlier in the season and pull off the big upset, getting number one and getting what is, I think, either a third or fourth or fifth quad one victory. Listen, I don't care who you are. If you have that many quad one wins and you don't make the tournament, there's some splaining to do. But enough about that. I want to get a more general thing with this. And the news story, like I said, is one that's been back a while. It's been a minute. But going back to the Wake Forest court storming with Duke's Kyle Filipowski getting run over and all that by the Wake Forest fans. Now, the main reason I felt compelled to address it isn't necessarily to take a side on court storming. Okay, that's not why I'm here. There's just so many bad arguments that were out there by people who are so much more prominent than any of us, who are these who won't admit that they're not as well knowledged in college basketball as the people at large. So they have big opinions that are just, quite frankly, really stupid. I'm going to call it what it is. For one, the first thing that made me pull my hair out is people trying to compare storming the field in football or storming a field in any other sport. Not that happens anywhere. Who stormed a baseball field? I'm sure that's happened at some point with some big postseason win. The Giants win the pennant or something like that. Everybody's out there like, oh my gosh, Kyle knows that kind of baseball history. Let's not go crazy. But yeah, that would be the kind of situation where I feel like that might warrant something like that. Anyways, to compare other sports to basketball in this regard is just outright foolish. Why? The setting for basketball, be it the NBA, be it college, be some sort of a high school game even, is just a far more intimate setting for a number of reasons. A, it's a smaller space. It's a smaller court, right? You could theoretically shoot a half court shot and brick off the rim. Whereas if you can throw a football the entire length of the field, you are in fact, let's just say you'll be getting some calls from some agents or getting an NIL deal potentially. That's what I'm getting at. Same would apply in other field sports, and mostly because it's outdoors. So when one comments, oh, well, this never happens in football. Well, yes, it does. Perhaps you've forgotten about the band getting on the field and getting run over in a famous clip that's now decades old, I'll grant you. Perhaps you've forgotten about LeGarrette Blount punching a fan in the face as a college student and then going on to have a successful NFL career. You know, but it's not like that's been incident free, but it's certainly been nothing like we've seen with Caitlin Clark and Kyle Filipowski in just this year. But this isn't me yelling at a cloud either, saying you should ban court storming. You may not like a tradition, but there are certain things that just are not going away. That's a fact. Okay. And I think court storming for a big upset is one of them. Like, for example, should UCF pull off the win against the number one Houston Cougars tonight, you better bet your entire bottom dollar that the court will be rushed once again, just like it was when the Kansas Jayhawks were in town for the Magic's, I think that was not the Magic, I'm sorry, the Knights' first Big 12 home game, right? That whole thing. And I would say, and rightly so. Then there's my next favorite crew, the dumbasses who utter, and I quote, "Get your ass off the court." Now, it's one thing if you're criticizing adult professional athletes. Now, granted, if you're brave enough to tell Draymond Green or Joel Embiid, get your ass off the court, even out there in the cyberspace, be it, you know, on social media, be it on some sort of a YouTube video or what have you, good luck to you. Because in Draymond's case, now he's at the point where he can not only bully you in person, but he can find you and deplatform you and move against you that way, now that he's a member of a podcast network, right? So you doing that to a kid, regardless about how you feel about, oh, well, he threw an elbow at the guy, or, oh, he initiated the contact, or any of that, get your ass off the court isn't even an option here, because they were running on the court with 0.7 seconds left on the clock, meaning the game wasn't over before the Mamma Jammas were running on the damn hardwood. So how does a player get his ass off the court when he's still supposed to be on the thing? And whatever happened, by the way, to the court being, or the field of play, at least during the time, being a sacred space? That is the one part of any campus, of any field, stadium, gathering, event, place, what have you, where fans just simply aren't allowed for a certain period of time. And if they break that sanctity, you're going to blame the player? It's just an absolutely horrible take. And listen, the concept is very simple, and I'm not the only one who coined this, but let's put it this way. You are having a top 10, you as a college, fill in the blank, I don't care. What's some out of you, your mama's state, whatever. You're going to have a top 10 college basketball program in your house. Chances are it's a big brand. Now, Houston's a little different because they're number one team in the nation. For some reason, they continue to get disrespected, probably because they're a former American Athletic Conference team, a conference that is constantly disrespected. But now that they're doing the damn thing still as a member of the Big 12, I hope to goodness that Houston turns some heads and gets some respect. Houston football, not so much, but basketball, please, for the love of sake, just Coach Sampson deserves it. The program deserves it. And I'm saying this as a guy who regularly covers UCF with the black and gold banneret. Bing! So, hey, how about for a game that big where you're going to have more attendance anyway and theoretically more gate ticket revenue, you get some more security in there, right? Maybe Bob, the retired cop who's you know, a septuagenarian, that's in your 70s for those who don't know, maybe he shouldn't be the guy that controls the rope that night. Maybe you just schedule intelligently, which I get it. Scheduling college basketball is difficult. I've heard it from coach after coach, but this is more of a facilities problem. You don't have the foresight to go, hey, security guys, let's do this. maybe you don't stop everybody, but maybe with 0.07 seconds left, the players could be safe for just long enough to actually get off the court and be relatively safe. Anybody who's waving at the sky thinking that they're actually going to successfully get court storming to go away, you're the problem, all right? You sound like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. Get off my lawn. Get off my wood. Well, now it sounds dirty, and EJ Christian's going to be excited here, sitting in the digital green room hearing that comment. But the punchline is this. All that needs happen is a security improvement. And the good thing about this is, at this point, college basketball in this time of year may not be the number one sport out there, but with what's going on with conference realignment and various things like that, there's going to be more money pulled in. There's going to be more popularity. This, I think, is the cost of doing business with big games like this, where there's a major Cinderella upset potential, But then again, what do I know? I'm just a student of the game. I could be wrong. It's only an opinion. So with that in mind, let's bring in a good friend of mine whose opinions are always all over the place, but I love him nonetheless, just as I love him as much as he has team fanhoods. My guy, EJ Christian, earnestly speaking, everyone's favorite Cowboy fan. Good to have you aboard, my friend.
Correct that, though. Not a Cowboy fan.
Chiefs fan. Sorry.
No. Well,
yeah. Fan. Sorry.
Commanders fan.
And sorry, Red Tails fan. Command. See, now we're all over the place. The team
exactly
things too. So now maybe you were a Commanders fan when you were a Red Tails fan, or maybe you were using an ethnic slur as a fan. But then again, you are of a darker hue. Is it still a slur? Now I'm just
although I could claim some of the Commanders is because my all-time favorite athlete's actually a part owner of the team. So technically, I could go that route, but I won't do that.
I would say you go Red Tails, and then that way you could claim the team appropriately.
Fair point. How you doing, Cal?
Pull the Tuskegee defense. What's going on?
Tuskegee, yes. I'm doing well, man. I'm excited about this one today with you.
Tuskegee defense.
My goal today is to not have any F-bombs on this appearance.
Yes, please. Because if I'll put it this way, if things go the right way in my life, that might be a bigger impact, but for a good reason. But we'll talk about that off air. Listen, man.
Exactly. Yes.
I know you as a resident wrestling fan and somebody who cheers for a Miami team. Go ahead and say the quote. I set you up.
Go Heat, bitch.
Thank you.
Wait, curse right. There you go.
That doesn't count.
Okay, cool. Okay.
No, it's
I gotta see the I gotta see the parameters here we're working with here. And I know the parameters.
Listen, I'm sure Dan Libitard or somebody at one point on the radio in South Florida there has used the word bitch on the radio. It's okay.
Oh, they do more than that now. That's sure.
Oh no, that's because they're on Muddle Media and they're
independent now. That's right.
YouTube, which I'm not mad at. That's a whole other question. That's something for the Earnestly Speaking podcast if you want to talk about that sometime.
That's correct. That is correct.
What can I say except you're welcome? But
you're right.
Let's get into what I want to bring you in here for. There's a lot of stuff I told you about, but let's start with NBA MVP. And I'm going to say this. My pick earlier in the season, and granted, I'm a little biased because of how he played when he was here in Orlando, and I saw him in person, and I was just mesmerized. Joel Embiid's pretty much out of the MVP race, I think, because of his injury situation.
And the new rules about to get awards, to be eligible for awards, you got to play 65 games. I mean, he was at the time my runaway myself, but the rules state that if you don't play 65 more games, you are ineligible for awards, and that's that.
Yeah, it's so with that in mind, I'd be curious to see your top 5, and I'm looking for a certain name. I'm not sure if you're going to evoke it, but if you do, I'll be very surprised. We'll talk about.
I definitely have a strong 3.
Okay, we can.
I can come up with 5. But I definitely have a strong 3. I have a tier. My tier 1 is 2 guys. It's SGA and Jokic. SGA and OKC and Nikola Jokic in Denver. Obviously, what he's doing. I mean, those guys are phenomenal. Right. SGA, what he's doing is out of this world, and what's even cooler is that on top of everything he's doing, it's also translating to wins now. Right now, they're either number 1, number 2 in the Western Conference now. I mean, that goes back and forth every other day now because of the standings of the top 4 teams of Clippers, Thunder, Nuggets, and one of the teams. The Wolves are all changing out that spot, but SGA is sustaining this now and winning games in the process. So by So my top 2 would be SGA 1, Jokic 2. I said Embiid would have been in there if he was still healthy. Obviously, he's not there, so we had to disqualify him. Number 3, I'm going to go with Jason Tatum, a guy that, while I've said in recent years has been a little frustrating for me because like he's a really talented guy, probably a fringe top 5 guy, not quite there because I feel like he doesn't have the dog in him yet, but a guy that has had some big playoff moments. Boston obviously has been the best team this year thus far as we get into this fourth quarter of the season. And Tatum's been a large part of that. Even when Porzingis being hurt at times, he's maintained it. But again, the problem is with Tatum is that, and the Celtics, is that we've seen this with this team year after year. This is all cool and all, but they got to at least get the finals again. Anything less than the NBA Finals appearance this year is a failure. So, but Tatum at 3. Fourth guy, 4th and 4 and 5. I gotta think about this a little harder.
Well, and listen, as lots of your lists are often fluid.
Yes.
If you were doing the EJ Christian version of Tool Time that you only see on the Huddle Up podcast,
Bing.
I would have my student of the game mug that's offered by T Public by way of Huddle Up. But
mine is downstairs. I did use it on Monday. So
nice. But yeah, my mom did my dishes for me before I jumped in. So I'm not mad.
That's adorable.
Well, I mean, Corbin my son was starting to get to bed, so like she got bored. I mean, let's not go too far.
She got bored. She does your dishes.
Don't get me started.
I wish I had a mom come to my house and get bored and do my dishes.
Hey, listen. If you've had any life around anybody in the healthcare profession, that's the kind of stuff that happens, man. But let's
fair point.
Bring it back to this, and as somebody who lives life in the Atlantic Division like you do, I know, go Heat, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
What about the talk of 2 players in particular who are now in? By the way, these 2 teams being the 4 and 5 seed is blowing the mind of the NBA. And let's be clear, the Magic look like they're about to put up another win tonight, probably.
Yeah, Magic watching the game, but actually have the game right now as we speak, up by 12 late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, the number of blowout wins I've attended as a member of the Orlando Magic media there, going there with A7BN Sports, it is compelling. But first, let me ask you about Jalen Brunson.
Another guy.
Is he a legitimate contender in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. Now, granted, New York has kind of faded a little bit last few weeks. Lost 7 of the last 10 games. A lot of injuries, though, too, including him. He got hurt on Sunday against Cleveland.
I mean, when I saw the Knicks in town here, they were down before the All-Star break. They were down Randall. So
correct. And down also and Unme, too. Also, OG was also out on top of that.
Absolutely.
So, he's definitely a guy you consider in the conversation as well, too. I mean, Brunson has been in 2 seasons here with the Knicks, he's been out of this world, and this. We knew he was a good player. We didn't think he was this good, know. And what he's done with these 2 years, it made the Knicks relevant again in a way we haven't seen since really the to some degree the Carmelo Anthony years in early aughts, but even more so late 90s. And they've been good for a good couple of years now. So you got to give him credit for that. And Brunson is the conductor of that train. So he's definitely if they go on top 5, I would definitely consider top 5 in there. Yeah.
What about? Well, I'll say this. Paolo Banchero.
I know. You mean Paul Banchero, future Heat player?
Where
cross my fingers.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me stop you right there, because there's no way the Magic will let that happen. I'm sure they're going to max him and
I'm just trying to steal your goods. That's all.
Listen, you may want to concentrate on holding on to Hemi before you talk that smack.
Shoot, at this point, Hemi going to retire very small.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
He's probably got multiple shoulder injuries from carrying.
Yeah, and he's also on the older side too. He's like mid-30s now, and his contract goes.
It's not. I mean, let's get back into it though. With that second-year player for a team who you don't know who the starting lineup is night to night, other than maybe Franz Wagner, right? Because of the injuries all over the place. And no disrespect to Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz, but as much as people want to talk about the Magic being confident in their team and not performing a trade up before the deadline, EJ, I'm pretty sure it's because there weren't buyers because of how tainted the goods are due to freaking injury. You know, I
Yeah.
could make the argument that Jalen Suggs is one of the better point guards the franchise has had since Jameer Nelson, but Paolo is the one constant. He's missed 2 games due to illness. I think it was Atlanta and I forget the other game off the top of my head, but it was a gimme they ended up winning.
Right.
You know? And he's became the 9th All-Star in Magic history this year as well.
Mhm.
In a year, by the way, you mentioned, hey, we're used to this from Boston. In a year where the Magic have broken records for the franchise with wins. I think the last time they had this many wins in this time of the year was 2009, something like that. The point is,
Gotta be. That'd be one of those Dwight years.
yeah, it's been a hot minute. They broke the franchise record for the longest win streak, taking it from 8 to 9. The Nets broke that, obviously. And, you know, I'll put it this way. That Brooklyn Nets game upcoming next week has the potential to be a relatively big deal because of the situation with I know that the Nets are 11th right now, but the race is tight enough that tiebreak could be important going in the play.
Well, right now, Orlando's right now in a 3-way tie, virtual tie with the Heat and the Knicks also too for the 6 between 4, 5, and 6 right now. So it's a race right now to get that 4 seed right now, and Orlando's right in the thick of it. And what they look, I told you when you started, this team will be pretty good. That they're one of my league pass teams to watch this year. And but they're better than I thought. They're better than I thought.
Yeah, I said the cap for them at the top for them was 6 though, and they're 4. Now I don't know that they're going to finish here.
Right.
Listen, the fact that considering things finish out there with if the things finish out with the Wizards as it looks like that they will, that they are what 5 games away from clinching a 500 record.
Yep.
Like, dude. Again.
Yep. Yeah, they're really good.
I just feel like Paolo, and call me a homer a bit if you want, I feel like Paolo needs to get more shine, but I think the problem is, and one thing, the problem is, and I'm going to pull the homer card here. Orlando is not a big enough market to draw attention to Paolo.
Well, I mean, yes, but also neither is Oklahoma City. And SGA is my leaderboard.
That's different. I'll touch on that in a second. I feel the point I'm going to make is if let's pretend that the Magic and the Knicks situation switched. I feel like Paolo would be getting the same fanfare that Brunson is in that big market.
That's different. Yeah. If you're talking about like fanfare just to be in the conversation, I'm with you on that one.
Sure.
You got to be special to get on top. And the part of the reason why SGA is getting the love he's getting is because he's been special this year. Not just this year, but really the last couple of years.
And OKC is a sneaky big market. For one, what else is going on in OKC to compete with it? Not a whole lot. And Oklahoma City's got a pretty big population base. It's certainly bigger than anything that Orlando has, where, by the way, literally built as a vacation place for all the sports that are here in Orlando. The Magic compete with all that. Hell, the Magic even has MLS, right?
Right. I'll say as much. If let's say the Magic had say the Magic were 10 games better than they were now. Let's say they were 46 or 45 and 20 or whatever it is. The record is 10 games better.
2 seed.
That now you're talking about a team that's trying to contend with Boston. That would get people to look at Banchero a little more. See again, what's helping SGA's argument here too, especially in the top MVP candidate rather. Well, obviously Embiid being out helps, but OKC has been really, really, really good this year with wins. I mean, they're ready in the mid.
There's those 6 wins right there,
right? So that helps with that. And, then you got to battle with the Jokic's and the Tatums and all these other big names, big markets. Luka's still getting. Dallas is still kind of in that 5, 6, 7 range. Luka's still getting a lot of love there too. So to break out of that whole mold, and especially when you're a small market team, you got to be special. You got to be. Kind of like, okay, well, this team is so good, we can't ignore it anymore. And I think that's the reason why Banchero does not get that top level love when it comes to MVP conversation.
Top level love. I don't want to be hearing about your social life at home. Anyways,
I apologize, buddy.
No, well, and I'll say this too. I feel like there's a game coming up with the Pelicans. I think next week that I think should be a pretty good test.
Oh yeah,
with what's
definitely
going on there, because I mean, I know the statement's been made by other pundits out east, or not pundits out east rather, but the NBA East. I'm not. It's not like Warriors from their heyday recently, kind of inevitable, but
right.
the writing's on the wall. Like the Cavs aren't bad. Donovan Mitchell and Garland are an excellent pair. They got a lot of good stuff going on there with Cleveland. I think they're okay, but
Cavs are really good this year, and it surprised me too because when they lost, who was it, Jared Allen? I think for part of the year, or was it Mobley? And people thought they're gonna flounder, and they turn up the heat. Now, granted,
they
turned the Cavs this last,
which you did.
Yeah, you saw I did there, right? But at the same time, they were pretty good last year, and they floundered in the first round of playoffs against New York. So,
well, the question I have is, are they actually a championship contender? Like, do if the Cavs made it to the East, forget the finals. If they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, you'd say they're overachieving, right?
I would lean yes on that one.
Okay.
I still think like that they're talented enough to get there. I personally, and I think last year did this to me. I think what happened last year in the playoffs in New York sort of like had a little pump the brakes, like kind of a feel to it. Like, yeah, we're good, but yeah, I don't know if we can beat Milwaukee in a 7-game series, a Boston 7-game series, and when Miami's on the P's and Q's, they hard to beat as well too. Then New York beats you. I would still say
that was a take notice occurrence for the Knicks, was them beating the Cavs in that series last
year. And not just beat the Cavs, beat them easily in 5 games.
Correct. Yeah, good point.
So I mean, again, like, would it surprise me? Honestly, I probably still will, because I still think, when come hell high water, it's still Milwaukee, it's still Boston, it's still
okay. So yeah, that's what I'm getting at too.
Yeah,
like,
so it'd be a bit surprise still. Yeah, a bit surprise.
Boston's 7.5 up on the conference. Okay, the whole Milwaukee Bucks Dame Lillard experiment. I'm not going to say it's a failure.
And now Doc Rivers now just thrown into that now in the last couple of weeks. So
yeah,
another part of that story.
That was a move of just pure desperation because the experiment was failing. That's,
of course.
You are right to bring up Doc Rivers, and I know you've had a lot to say about it on the Earnestly Speaking podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, I hated Drew Holiday being relocated because a solid coach would be necessary to quickly account for a change in identity like that. And I don't know that, be it Doc or whoever he replaced, was the right candidate there. I'll put it that way.
It was tough because Drew Holiday was kind of like their part of that big identity was the defense, whatnot, and being that stopper. The thing is, I understood why they did it. I don't think they accounted for that if Drew Holiday got picked up by a contender that directly affects the Bucks, and it wasn't just like at the time when before Boston signed them. I was saying on the podcast, if Miami gets Drew Holiday or Boston gets Drew Holiday, that move almost cancels out Dame Lillard, because Drew Holiday is the kind of defender that has given Dame Lillard fits through years.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point.
And you give it to Boston, and with a team that already is a contender, with the 2 guys in Brown and Tatum.
You sent them to the other conference, for goodness sake. Like, what are you thinking? I don't know. Maybe
I don't think the Milwaukee thought about like maybe that the Portland will dump it off more parts. Yeah.
The NBA is my third language, and I hated that. And granted, like, listen, Chris Middleton's made me look smart for predicting Bucks championships for a while now. Rises and falls. Many times I've said, hey, Chris Middleton's on the milk cart. He needs to step up if they're going to win.
It was got to be healthy first and foremost. See, that's one of the problems we've had in the last 2 years.
That's what I'm getting to. He's starting to age a little bit, so healthier.
That's right.
Yeah,
Milwaukee also got sneaky old too last couple of years as well. So
sneaky about it. We've been talking Milwaukee for years. This is what happens.
The window is definitely limited now. I would say 2, maybe 3 years tops.
Yeah. Well, so let me reel it back in. That's what I'm getting at too, right? Mm-hmm. The Bucks have their own challenges. They're 7.5 back. You don't believe Cleveland is an NBA, or excuse me, an
NBA
representative,
championship contender. I'm not there yet. I'm still. I got to see more. I got to see him in a series, dude. Honestly, I think last year burned me. The
And
way it wasn't they lost to New York, it's the way they lost. They lost 5 games.
And the Magic and the Knicks, at this point, nobody feels that same way. And the only reason why the Heat are credible is because they were there last year. So
and have been there the last couple of years, actually, quite frankly.
I mean,
and yeah,
it's an experience thing there. And then with Embiid's injuries, I'm not going to make the same mistake you did and say that their season's over. But man, it's problematic, right?
I mean, if Embiid even comes back, first off, we don't even know what's coming back. They keep saying April possibility, but then even if you get him back in April, how much time is he gonna have to get reacquainted, chemistry, the whole nine? I mean, look, Philly was good this year. They've been good when he was healthy, and then once he fell again, the MVP conversation about like he's proving his value by not being there. They've fallen apart since he's left. So. But it's going to take time for him to get acclimated again, and in that timing, like how much time is going to have between then the playoffs to do it? Will they even be in the playoffs? Will they be in the play-in situation when that happens? Because right now they're falling apart. Right now, to where there might be a play-in team. So
it's clear that the for now, and it would be if one put their money on the Celtics heading to the finals. I don't think anybody would be surprised. And matter of fact,
it's at this point an expectation. In fact, if you ask me now, who has a better chance? Like, who has a better odds of getting to the finals this year, Denver or Boston, each conference? And look, I think both will get there. But I think if you had to pick one, gun to your head, Boston would be a better chance to get to the finals because I think their trek's a little easier.
Well, and the West is just a lot more competitive. And
it is.
Mentioned OKC. It's still weird to see the Timberwolves.
Isn't it? And they're also a matchup nightmare for Denver too. Also, forget that. So I'm not saying Denver won't beat them. They beat them last year.
That's interesting because the mix of Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, which I'm so glad he's emerging as being such a major player. He's a guy I've always liked since seeing him. He's out of Kentucky, I think.
That's correct. He's out of Kentucky.
But yeah, seeing him that year where he was just playing college ball in the tourney, I just enjoyed watching him play. In general. And even though certain people told me I should be watching Edwards so closely, I was more impressed by Rudy Gobert and Cat than I was. No disrespect, DJ Christian. I'm just
I do think though in the West though, like it's funny because like I say that with the Boston, the odds on with Boston, but I'm still on the fence though. Even though OKC's been really good this year, and Minnesota's been really good this year, and they're great stories. You still it's like with Cleveland. You still got to see it, like the experience or lack of experience will show out. Like I said yesterday, I did a little 1-minute video, YouTube short yesterday, and this is after the I swore it wasn't necessarily a reaction to OKC losing to the Lakers on Monday, but what I said was that as good as OKC has been this year, if the Lakers and Thunder play in the playoffs, I might still take the Lakers in 6 or 7 games. Because as long as LeBron James is able to dictate pace, and the lack of experience the Thunder comes out there, lack of patience, the Lakers can expose that.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up the Lakers. I wanted to ask you about that specifically, but first of all, where would we find that short?
Oh, it's on my YouTube page at youtube.com/Ernest Christian.
Oh, it'd be on the Ernest Christian YouTube page.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct. Bing.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's right. Come on.
Well, you do the voice stuff here, man. That's your gig.
I'll say Bing after you plug your stuff. That's how it works, man.
True. That's very true. That's very true.
Anyways, but I'm glad you brought up the Lakers because I have to tell you, man, I don't get it. So help me out. This is one of those student of the game moments where for now you can speak the language a little bit more fluently.
Okay.
Even though I've exposed some of your absolutely horrible basketball takes in just this past year. I'm joking. But
it's okay.
You still loved it the 1 year where it was Indy versus the Heat, and I referred it to their center, his old mother Hibbert. I know this.
Oh, yeah. 10 years ago.
Is it that long? Wow.
It's been that long, buddy. Yes, it is.
Hey, listen, I've been trying hard to speak the language better. I'm just saying. But the punchline's this. Like, I get that Braun, even at 5,000 years old, breaking 40,000. Like, I don't know. Does he have more years on his life or than points that he's scored? I don't know at this point, right?
Yeah.
But no, breaking the 40,000 point mark, being a guy that's been in the league for decades, literally. he's still a force.
He's
And a player
incredible.
of relative size, at
Mhm.
his particular position. Anthony Davis is a guy that's huge in his own right. When he wants to play big, he's dangerous.
And he's been healthy this year because that's for the first time in probably his entire career has been the healthiest he's been.
Knock on wood, please.
Yes.
Austin Reeves, the same. A good shooter, probably about the only shooting presence that's not one of the other two players.
That is
Not exactly a small guy either. The Lakers have size, but for all that I keep hearing about, you can expose this and that. If you can't shoot the bean in this NBA, I don't care. Why are we talking? I mean, I know why we're talking about it because it's the LA Lakers. They're the biggest draw in the NBA, whether I like it or not. I've said already, I'm glad that Pat Riley went to Miami so I could find some way to actually cheer for and respect him because I'm just, every sports person and host has their biases. I just have always disliked the Lakers. Now, I respect what they did. Sure, Samani Walker hitting a shot after the buzzer that counted was what got them past the Sacramento Kings in that era with Kobe and Shaq.
Well, aren't you also a low-key Celtic fan too also? Growing up?
My dad was a Celtic follower, and I mean...
Well, that makes sense then.
Who doesn't respect Larry Bird, but I wouldn't call myself a Celtic fan.
No. Okay.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, like the Celtics, I feel like watching the Celtics this year is relatively, air quotes, boring. But
every game was a blowout pretty much because they did that damn good.
I mean, it's not, Popovich, Spurs with Tim Duncan boring,
right?
But what are we doing?
I get it. No, I get it.
But listen, you've said that they're a danger, but I mean, are you credibly taking them, the Lakers, as a Western Conference Finals candidate?
Here's the thing, though. We had this very discussion last year at this time, and they did do that. They did get to the conference finals last year.
Yeah.
Were there some breaks there? Yes, some breaks. But again, that happens all the time in sports.
Let me throw this in.
Go ahead.
Because, I forgot we had this conversation last year, but thank you for adding that. Mm-hmm. The reason why they got there was they got past and it was the closest sweep I've ever seen, is what I'll say, which is an odd thing to say, but it's what happened. This
combined 13 points, I think it was.
Yeah.
14 points on that. Yeah.
Good stat. But the Warriors of late have been pretty steaming hot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the Lakers could do it quite like that again.
I think the odds are against them. I think what's different this year for this team is that the pieces they have this year and the pieces that they decided to keep, the Austin Reeves, the D'Angelo Russells, those guys, they are playing better now too. Especially they're starting to win some games again.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Western Conference playoffs is gonna be all about matchups. Like again, the Thunder can beat X team depending on who they play and when they play them. The thing is, too, it was tough. It's not like the NFL or college basketball, for that matter. These are 7-game series now. This is not random Tuesday night at Crypto.com Arena where you're beating a team and and react to it. No, you got to play that same team 4 out of 7 times, and that's the dynamic. And this is where LeBron and AD do have an advantage over teams like the Kings and the Thunder, and to a lesser degree the Wolves. That's where the experience come in. Is the adjustments, and if the Lakers are able to make those adjustments, of course, it would not shock me if we see another rematch of Denver, LA again in the Western Conference Finals. Now, do I think it's going to happen? No, because I think if the Clippers are healthy, which again, Russell Westbrook's out for a little bit, he'll be back before the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, cross your fingers, Kawhi stays healthy. Cross your fingers, Paul George stays healthy. I think the biggest challenge of Denver is not even. I think the biggest challenge of Denver is the other LA team.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to check out the Clips yet. I know they're going to come to Orlando here soon. I'm looking forward to checking them out there. But the Clippers are quality basketball from what I've heard. I need to get in front of a TV and watch a full game of them. I've seen enough to be intrigued, is what I'll say. Mm-hmm. And I'm with you. I think the Clippers are a bigger threat than the Lakers today. So
if healthy, yes, that's a big caveat though, and unfortunately. But that caveat, that asterisk applies to both those teams because you have guys in those rosters, especially the stars, that do get hurt at the worst times.
So, Hey, man, I'll tell you what, to your credit, I know we had other stuff on the docket, but I didn't realize I was going to go about 30 minutes of NBA with you here, man. And I got some good time here coming with Colum Cronin here soon. So
All right.
I'm going to table this. Don't worry. Brandon Howard will be in next week to talk about some of the NFL stuff we had on tap. So look forward to that, my friend. But I'll see you again soon. I know we got an episode of Huddle Up here in the off-season brewing.
Yeah, and I know you and I have a student game report to do very soon, a couple of weeks. When free agency kicks
I
off.
didn't know that, but I'm glad you told me.
Yeah, you already know. You know how the pattern works on our show. Come on now, we'll figure it out. Obviously, the date for that one, but yeah.
EJ Christian, tell the world.
Podcast, of course. Earnestly podcast. I have I got a lot of works. Check out my Linktree first off. My Linktree. I have like 3 different shows, 4 different shows, whatever. But I'm also, like I said, Huddle Podcast. I'm there when we are during the year doing football every Tuesday, of course. I'm on Twitter /X at EJ Christian 7.
No,
of course
you're not on X. So
that's right. Yeah, I want to piss off woke Jim again for calling it X. And my YouTube page, especially guys. That's really everything. That's the one thing I'm really promoting more than anything else. My YouTube page.
Some of these sorts you've had are good. Like people can see.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Yeah, I've been putting a lot of stuff up there, like a lot of content there.
See how bad you are at organizing your children. There's just a lot of things they can see.
Hey, listen, it is what it is, man. YouTube.com.
Is it Earnestly Speaking or is it Earnest Christian YouTube?
Ernest Christian, my YouTube page. It's because all my work is there. All my shows are there. So I'll put my name on there. At youtube.com /@Earnest Christian. Of course, we're trying to get right now. The goal is to get to 500 subscribers now. So that's the goal now. So,
on that, I shan't front. Ernest EJ Christian. Thanks for
and no cussing today. Look at it. Not one.
I am so proud of you.
You're welcome.
If you keep that up, we might have to have a better conversation about doing more things. And I'm kidding, but yeah, buddy, great to have you aboard, man. We'll catch you on the next one.
You got it, brother. Take it easy, man.
Ernest EJ Christian. God, I've been potting with that dude for a long time. Don't ask me to count. It makes me feel awkward. Like Phillip Rivers was still in the league. Michael the Burner Turner was still a thing. Anyway, so listen, I notice I'm using AFC West examples as a nice transition to talk some Broncos stuff with my guy, Colum Cronin from the Irish NFL show, Colum from Cork, as I like to call him. And we'll get into that here right now. And as promised, we're crossing the pond again. Listen, when matters of things Bronco come up, I always reach out to my guy. It's one thing to meet a person on the West Coast of the United States. It's another to talk to him when he jumps over your state, or at least over your coast, to go back home. One of the hosts and curators of the Irish NFL show, Colum Cronin, Colin from Cork, as I call him. Welcome aboard, my friend. I wish it was a happier occasion that we're talking about your Broncos, but glad to have you aboard one more time, my guy.
Always good to join you, Kyle. And yeah, we're definitely, there's plenty to talk about in relation to the Broncos. I think everybody knew this point was coming for the past few months. It was just when exactly it was going to happen and where exactly do perhaps all the parties involved go from here.
Yeah, well, well, let me ask you this real quick because of curiosity. I mean, we've been talking off here leading up to this for a good half hour, but now I just had a thought that I'm curious about. And we've talked in the past about the whole, we'll call it myth of the threat of moving a team to the NFL. But it's that point of view of you being there in Ireland. How much does the draft stuff play there? Like the combine in particular, where we just recently experienced that, obviously. Like, is the Irish NFL public? I mean, I know you're not glued to the screen necessarily watching sprints because of the time difference potentially, but how much buzz surrounds that?
Well, it's definitely grown in some ways, and what's probably interesting, Kyle, in some ways, is that there were 4 Irish guys who took part in the combine this year. So the NFL is trying to grow globally. It's got the international player pathway. So there were 3 kickers and 1 punter who tried out. We'll have to see if anything comes of that. So it's talked about, but people aren't glued to it and watching it. And I think it is fascinating, though, at a time when people are discussing the combine and the way in which perhaps the NFL is going to have to change certain things to get people stateside to continue to keep watching, and the way, because the top talent isn't participating in the testing in the way maybe they used to. But international audiences are obviously new enough to it. It is very different to anything that exists, say, in the Premier League or in rugby, or in cricket. So international fans will certainly keep an eye on it. And I think having those 4 Irish guys this year meant that it probably got more coverage, but the coverage certainly focused on them as opposed to, say, the QB drills. I'm talking like the mainstream stuff. Obviously, with social media, everybody's plugged in, but the news over here covered that rather than the guy breaking the 40 record.
Well, and I think that's a win-win for the athlete and the league too. Like, and listen, it's incentive for guys to go from their native country. I mean, listen, I cover UCF4, the black and gold banneret. Bing! So the best example I have is Australia's Mitch McCormick, right? He is their punter, right? I mean, listen, it's almost y'all like, or not McCormick, I'm sorry, McCarthy, Mitch McCarthy. And I could see a track for him where like there was a whole thing where he had to go back to Australia to sign something to participate in NIL. That's a whole other question. But through NIL, and then it's essentially branding. If a guy doesn't participate in the combine, not that there's too many special teams guys that'll opt out of the combine, but for guys for special teams, like guys that like for foreign players like that are trying to get attention on them, if they're invited, they get a branding bump because then they get seen here locally in the States. Your local media, or the local media for the player, whoever it is, would focus on that. I think, and by the way, in NFL, it's trying to expand globally, would be incentivized to invite them. So I think there's, now granted, I kind of agree too that the combine has been broken down itself so much that it's become a science that people, you pay a combine expert to teach you how to jump off the line and become a track star for a week. Like, I get that notion. The days of Dontari Poe lifting a butt ton on the weight bench and then becoming a star D tackle because of it in Kansas City, those are probably gone. I get that. Or you might get a guy that is the occasional what's his word, surprise like that. But I know too many players personally, I'm not going to name names, but did well on a pro day or in a combine and got a little bit more stock than they probably should have and didn't produce in the league as one would have hoped. It was a failed experiment, right? So I can see how the combine has its questions, but there's still an opportunity for that to be a promotional tool. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I'll leave it at that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it'll change and evolve in ways. The NFL is the biggest show in town. Its ratings dwarf everything. The figures are out. I think 62.5 million global audience for the Super Bowl, up 10% globally. They dominate stateside, and they're beginning to really get a foothold in many other parts of the world. Since I was last on with you, Kyle, we now know, obviously, game in Brazil on the Friday night. We know that there's going to be a game in Madrid. I think it is only a matter of time before you see a game in Paris, a game in Dublin.
Yeah.
And the talk this week was around, again, the owners are going to look to push for that 18-game season. That they're going to use that to have a game. Teams are going to play internationally every year. They're going to be a minimum of 16 international games a season. I'm convinced of it. I think you'll see games everywhere, and I think they'll use that. They'll put in an extra bye week to give the teams the time to do that. It's what the owners want. The Vikings are coming back to London. They've only just been over there. The Falcons were back over. Obviously, the Jags have a commitment to London. The Jags got in there ahead of anyone else, but other teams are really interested in doing it. And you saw the reaction to the Chiefs last year in Germany. It was like a home game for them. So this is only going one direction.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the Vikings participating in Dublin games more correctly. Well, I shouldn't say correctly, but I would more assume they would end up in London because, let's put it this way, the quarterback most likely to be a Puritan voted was Kirk Cousins. If you saw the the quarterback show on Netflix, I think that's pretty obvious. I'm making jokes, Colum. This is what I do. But let's pull back into it here too. So, I mean, listen, I know you know why you're here, okay? The Broncos news came out. What do you think of Sean Payton's new haircut? Now, obviously, the release of Russell Wilson hit the news over the past week here. There was always kind of a concept like, I know that's a lot of money. Will they do it? I was pretty convinced they were going to write him out. Boy, did I get that wrong. How surprised were you?
I with how sour it went, because if it had the season had ended without him being benched, without him going public about the Broncos allegedly. Now they say the wording was different, but there was a contractual dispute where lawyers got involved and legal letters were issued, and to me it was only going one way because of that, and because Sean Payton is in such a strong position. Look, it never made sense to have Russell Wilson married to Sean Payton.
Right.
Russ's strengths are almost the antithesis of what Sean Payton looks for in a QB. It was a forced marriage in many respects, and in fairness to Russ, the entirety of his time in Denver was something like that. He wanted out of Seattle, even though I now believe that Pete Carroll probably believed in Russell Wilson more than anyone else, but Russ wanted out. The Broncos wanted Aaron Rodgers. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett for that reason. It was like you're going to prom, okay? And the girl you're going to ask to prom, Kyle, she loves the color green. So you go out and you get a green blazer and you get a green flower, and then you ask her and she says, actually, I'm going to go with my ex. I'm going to stay here. And you panic and you ask the next girl you see. You weren't that into her. You weren't really set up for it. That was the Broncos and Russell Wilson. The Broncos were all in on Aaron Rodgers. Instead, they ended up with Russell Wilson, and it didn't work from the outset. It never really worked, and as a result, we are now in a situation where the Broncos are taking 85 million in dead money. 85 million.
$85 million. Listen, if you haven't seen Austin Powers yet and you don't get the Dr. Evil reference, get a hold of your life, okay? But listen, by the way, you mentioned the date in question wearing green. Now, the Broncos ended up stuck with an ugly green suit in the form of Nathaniel Hackett. And then they had to sell it secondhand to the New York Jets. I love this analogy. I'm rolling with it, Colum. Yeah, and I think and it's no secret that I am pro Russell Wilson and I am anti Nathaniel Hackett on this show. This is me having my strong opinion. I can make another argument that this is still reverberation for how bad Nathaniel Hackett was in the coaching ranks for the Broncos. And at least say what you will about the rift between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson being what it is and leading to this eventual dispute and all that happened with them questioning his contract in the middle of the season, allegedly threatening to bench him, on and on and on. Rusty's numbers weren't so bad. Now, granted, they weren't worth the value of his contract, right? But he was 8th in touchdowns, I think, something like that. I think the number's 20 and 8 with a touchdown interception ratio. I forget it off the top of my head here. I thought I was going to be smart enough to remember it. I'm blowing that. That's my fault. But the punchline is, was he a top 5 quarterback? No. Was he a bad quarterback? Also, no. But the thing is, he's getting paid as if he should be 2 steps at most below Patrick LeVon Mahomes II. And that obviously can't pan out here, right?
No, I mean, the thing is that, you're looking at some of the stats, and it's funny. Warren Sharp did a piece about this today, where Russ threw 27% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage last year. That is number one out of 509 QBs since 2005. He threw 62% of his passes within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. That is second highest out of 509 QBs. So there was no confidence from Sean Payton in allowing Russell Wilson to play in the intermediate zone in particular. So Russ essentially either dumped it off, or he waited till the second phase and he threw up a moon ball, which Cortland Sutton occasionally went up and got.
Well, you said occasionally, he's still completed 66% on the year. That's not bad.
Yeah, but if 20%, 27% of those are behind the line of scrimmage,
I don't know his long ball percentage. I didn't look that up specifically. So yeah, there's something to be said. There's data out there that can answer that question. Did he hit Cortland Sutton enough? And that's certainly a fair point.
I don't think it was going to work. Like Sean Payton's whole philosophy, right? There's a reason Michael Thomas got called Slant Boy. I mean, Drew Brees was known. Drew Brees lived, for the most part, not entirely, but particularly as he got older and as the arm strength went a little bit in that 5 to 15 yard area. Russ it was completely out of that. It was either under 5 yards or it was over 15 yards with all the deep ball stuff if the Broncos found themselves in that situation. So it was never going to work philosophically. And I think what you probably saw, like in Russ, there were some of the touchdown passes were magic, right? And I think some of that is Russ's ability. He is a talented QB. Right. Though I think he needs to play in a certain way. And I think some of that was Sean Payton, who is a very good offensive mind. Now, they both have their flaws, and I just think that the marriage couldn't work. Sean Payton is looking for a QB who plays in rhythm, who plays on time, and who gets the ball out. Russ is not that QB. He has never been that QB. Yeah. And he's 5'11", Kyle. He just asking that type of QB to throw to the middle of the field, it was just never going to work. But you have to ask, that it's an 85 million cost that the Broncos find themselves in, and how did they get out of that, and where does Russ go from here as well? One of the interesting things I think I saw over the last week is there's been a lot of talk from some people about Russ being available on vet minimum. So you could essentially pay Russ peanuts and have Russ on your team. But the interesting piece that not a lot of people seem to have picked up on is Andrew Brandt, the former GM of the Packers, pointed out that while you can do that in theory, teams and owners in particular won't want to do that. So the Broncos have to pay. Russ is owed $39 million in cash. That has to be paid. But if another team doesn't take on a chunk of that, what goes around comes around, according to Andrew Brandt. This is what he says. This is the guy who's been there. He's been in the office. He's done it. And he said at the owners' meeting, he said politics plays a role. So he doesn't think Russ plays for vet minimum. He said it'll be on a discount. The Broncos are going to have to eat a huge chunk of it. But he said people thinking that there won't be politics involved, that other teams won't think that, hey, this could have been us. So that is just something to maybe factor in. Although I think Schefter said today that the Broncos have said to Russ, you are free. You don't need to wait until the start of the league season. You don't need to wait for anything. Go and see if you can find a team. But it still means that the Broncos are down and have been down now because the trade for Sean Payton as well. They haven't had a first round pick in 3 years. They haven't had a second round pick. And they've all got all this dead cap that will begin to bite.
Yeah, listen, the bill always comes due, and something I'm seeing a lot in like, for example, Jacksonville Jaguars Twitter is, pay so and so whoever, because there's so many contract questions on the Jags right now. I don't want to narrow it down. Pay so and so whatever. The money isn't real. Jalen Ramsey said so. The part that everybody's missing, at some point, the damn check comes due, right? You threw all this money out, the check's going to come due. I can appreciate Sean Payton ripping off the Band-Aid to truly reboot. And at that point, the only issue is keeping the guys around that you want as linchpins for that rebuild. And I don't know who that would is. Is Jerry Jeudy a guy you want to keep as one of those players? I wouldn't think so necessarily. Just as an example, you could probably come up with some names that fall into that category, but I don't know. A, I don't know who they are, and B, that's probably at this point Sean Payton's biggest problem. Now that you've kind of shown your hand, letting Rusty see the door. But before we kind of speculate on what would happen on the Broncos side, the adorable theories out there that I'm hearing, I say adorable because I don't know how realistic they are the Falcons, which I just don't see that happening, or the Steelers. I don't think the Steelers are a fit, but tell me what you think of those teams, or if you have a someone else in the field out there in mind.
I don't think it will be either of those, Kyle, because I think that the Falcons seem to be in pole position for Kirk Cousins. It's funny, probably a week ago, it seemed like Kirk Cousins was potentially going back to Minnesota. But all the talk now appears that the Falcons, and the fact that you had Raheem Morris say, hey, I wouldn't be here if we had better QB play last year. That's very telling.
I mean, he listened to the Student of the Game podcast in the preseason last year. I tried to tell everybody, shouts to my guy Danny Thompson, shouts to my guy Mark Mancini, that the Falcons weren't going to do anything with Desmond Ridder. But yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
So and the Steelers, it just doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of interest there for us. They appear, and remember, this is an organization they finally moved on from Matt Canada in season, but they tend to stick by their decisions, and they appear to want to give Kenny Pickett time with Arthur Smith. I know there are some Steelers fans that really don't like that, but the Steelers have a way of doing things. They have a way of going about things, and it would appear that may well be what they are planning to do, in that they feel Kenny was hampered by having Matt Canada. I don't know if I would agree with that. I can kind of understand where Steelers fans are coming from, but I just don't think they're going to go down the Russell Wilson route. If I was to say where I think Russ might end up, I don't think he's going to go too far at all. I think he is going to stay in the AFC West. I think Russell Wilson is going to be a Las Vegas Raider.
Wow, that's quite the gamble you're making there. To see what I did there, Colum. The Raiders is compelling. I'm not going to lie, especially if they could get Jimmy G off the books.
They can after he has the suspension for ped use. He has voided all his guarantees, and therefore he can be cut without penalty. And so again, now they may. We'll see. Whether you want to go with what Andrew Brandt says, if he's right, but no matter whether if he's right, they have to pay something, but it's still heavily discounted.
Of course.
If they're getting him for vet minimum and it's a couple of million at most, well, that there's no reason that you can't say get Russell Wilson and Saquon. But listening to what Antonio Pierce was talking about, it sounded very much to me like they wanted a veteran, and they are a team who they like star names, right? They brought in Devonta Adams when really that team kind of had no business doing that in certain ways, Kyle, but they did it.
They were trying to show loyalty for the new fan base there. I mean, I get it.
I was fortunate enough to be at opening night of the Super Bowl. It was held in the stadium this year. It was the first time they have done that. Record crowds there. Mark Davis was smiling like a Cheshire cat. He wants to put Raiders fans in those seats, because up to now it hasn't really been a Raiders home game. It's been the road teams who have dominated the stadium. I think if he was able to get Russell Wilson to go in there on a cheapish deal, they can bring in a couple of other names, and Russ essentially gets to stay within the division. He plays the Broncos twice a year. Las Vegas isn't a bad place to be for a celebrity couple either. I think it makes the most sense when I look around the league and I look who has QB needs. I just don't see Russ going to Minnesota. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense with Kevin O'Connell, but with Pierce and what they are looking to do there in Vegas, I can see that.
So let me because you in all your dry Irish style, you just dropped a pretty big bomb, and I'm not going to let you get away with just being like, oh, I'll just leave this here. Carry on. Cheers, Kyle. No. Okay. What you just did was put Russell Carrington Wilson in a place. Now, granted, keep in mind the quarterback situation in the AFC West outside of Denver is insane. Patrick LeVon Mahomes II, then with Justin Herbert, and now, if your theory is correct, Russell Carrington Wilson and fill in the blank assumed first round draft pick by the Broncos, because I'm assuming they're going to make a splash to get somebody. I know. Well, we'll get to what the Broncos might do in a second, but then you just casually dropped the name Saquon Barkley out there, which, by the way, all my Texans fans audience is going to be pissed to hear that, because they're sure he's going to be wearing a different shade of blue rather than doing anything with silver and black. But let's pretend you nail that. And then, oh, by the way, Devontae Adams, what you're telling me is you have Pro Bowl caliber and possible potential Hall of Fame caliber, depending on the position, people in all of your skill spots. I mean, that's pretty nutty, dude. I like it.
But it's the Raiders. They're still a name, right? And
it's what they do. Also a good point you make, by the way.
And I just think for Russ, right? The Raiders, especially with Pierce being a guy who, he's a rookie head coach, right? In many respects, right? He had the back end of last season, but it's not a guy who has loads of kind of coaching
acting guy.
Yeah. Now, and he's in there, but he's going to want a vet. I think they are not going to want to take a younger QB. I just don't see that being, especially with Adams there, and needing to get people into the stadium, right? Because
I don't think Adams wants a
no. Oh wait, no, I don't think so. So to me, and the other thing is, like, Russ came to the Broncos knowing that Mahomes was there. And remember that summer when he did, or the off season he did come, there was so much talk about the AFC West. You have to have an ego to be an NFL QB. You have to have an ego to be an NFL head coach. So I don't think Russ would shy away from it in that respect. And if he was, like, Russ was on track to be a Hall of Fame QB. That has taken a wobble. You can't deny that after the 2 years that he's had. Now he needs to get it back on track wherever the next landing spot is. Right. If he was to go, somewhere, I think that the Raiders might be willing to offer him more assurances. Now, nothing is ever guaranteed, but hey, we're not going to take you're not a bridge QB here. You're going to be our guy. We're going to give you this year at least to show what you can do. Whereas if he was to go someplace, if he did go to Minnesota, right, and JJ McCarthy, they decide they're going to get Russ, but they're also going to take JJ McCarthy. And JJ, because this is a guy who's not even 21, but he just sits there, and Russ doesn't have the best start. And then after 8-9 weeks, the fans are clamoring to have JJ in there. So to me, Russ playing in a dome in a more controlled environment with a team who do want to run the football makes a whole ton of sense, because Russ needs a good running game, and that's why I mentioned Saquon.
Yeah, well, no, and by the way, the free agency for the running back position is absolutely silly. We talk about that with Ernest Christian leading into this segment, but what I think What compels me the most about the Raiders is this, and it's the very same reason I don't think it'll work in Pittsburgh. He's not the right mentality. Does a guy who needs an assistant to communicate with his teammates make sense in the blue collar culture that is the Steelers? Hell no. I ain't gonna fly at all. And I think that's exactly why they don't have any interest in him. The whole reason why Kenny Pickett was drafted in the first place is because he was a hometown guy. And by the way, I don't think he's been given enough time to develop. You want to know what got him to start? Being better than Mitch Trubisky. Not exactly a tall bar. And I can say for a fact that Russell Wilson is better than Mitch Trubisky. I don't think there's any argument there. It makes football sense, but I don't think it's a fit. Now, do I think the Steelers should consider a veteran of some sort to fill the gap a little bit and give Pickett possibly time to develop, or for them to better realize he's not the guy, while continuing to compete in what I'm sure you will agree is a very rugged and difficult AFC North? Yeah, because you're still paying for the sins of waiting too long to part with Ben Roethlisberger and properly hand those keys off. I don't think we need to build on that anymore. But taking it back to Rusty, for the same reasons you mentioned, that kind of celebrity, shall we say, would fit in an LA or a Las Vegas kind of surrounding. And to that end, where there is some glitz and glamour allowed, for lack of a better word, it tracks for me. So yeah, I can the more you talk about it, like, let's put it this way. At first, I almost sent you to HR to get tested, but the more you talk about it, the more I might just say, hey, let's pretend Florida's a legalized marijuana state and we can move on. So no, joking, but yeah, the interesting piece, it doesn't have to be Saquon either. As I mentioned, the free agency for running backs is ridiculous. Any of them would be nice. Like, let's say, for example, the Titans do move off of Derrick Henry. Now, granted, that would be more of a rental, but damn, that's a pairing. You know, the last time that Russell Wilson had a big running back like that was a difference maker? I know you remember Skittles, and the next best thing to Marshawn Lynch in the league right now is that guy, period, point blank in the story. So there's compelling things that can happen there. I like where you're going.
I think though, I think Henry would be fantastic there. But if I was, and you mentioned the Texans listenership that you have, I wouldn't be surprised if I know they're banging the table for Saquon, but Derrick Henry makes a lot more sense there with the scheme that they play. So they are going to bring in a running back, absolutely. I think the Texans may end up with Derrick Henry. But look, that's all to be decided. I 100% agree with you that pairing Russ with a big bruiser of a running back is the way to go.
Yeah, and there's fewer and fewer of those out there than before. So, but let me take it back to this end. Your beloved Broncos are essentially now without a star quarterback. What do they do here, man? What's going on? What would you like to see?
They're going to have to draft, Kyle, I think. And if you again look where nobody really knows any of these things, but certainly as we sit here today, recording this in March of 2024, this year's QB class looks better than next year's QB class. Next year's QB class does not look like a particularly strong one. I know there's been some talk that Sean Payton, is at the stage of his career where he doesn't want a rookie. But who is out there that would the Broncos? Remember now, the Broncos are going to have to probably take. They can cut it in slightly different ways. They can essentially do a kind of a 45 kind of 37, or they can take kind of 53 of it this year. But they're going to have a huge chunk of change that they can't take. So it's not like they can go out and get Kirk Cousins. So to me, they have to draft. And the problem is that it's also the Broncos do not have a huge amount of draft ammo. They really should have made trades last year. They should have been willing to move off of Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. They don't. There's rumors today that they're willing to shop both of those guys. I think they're probably looking to get a little bit of ammo to go up. To me, because and I was fortunate to talk with Randy Mueller, the former GM, spent time with the Chargers, with the Saints, with the Dolphins, with the Seahawks. He was GM twice. He was director of pro scouting. He was director of pro personnel, and Kyle, and this isn't that the more recent talk. Randy Mueller had written a column back in December where he said that NFL teams would be much higher on JJ McCarthy than the analysts or the scouting analysts because of JJ's traits and because of his processing. And so I talked to him about that. He is very high on him because of his processing. And he said, from his knowledge of Sean, if you were to pair Sean, he thinks Sean would like somebody like JJ McCarthy and the willingness to throw over into the middle of the field. JJ's issue is he doesn't tend to throw to the other side of the field. His right hand doesn't tend to go to the left hand side, but he is willing to go to the middle. I just think the Broncos are going to have to go with youth, and I wonder if they can get enough ammo to go up. If they can't, I think whoever is there at 12, they're going to have to go with and see what happens. Because ultimately, when you consider the recent enormous quarterback trades, right, it hasn't worked out for Russ. It hasn't worked out for the Browns and Deshaun Watson, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, that's a separate question. Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, but it hasn't certainly worked out to date for the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. But the San Francisco 49ers also made an enormous trade to go up and get Trey Lance. Now, yes, they looked into Brock Purdy, but part of the reason Brock Purdy has been as good as he has is they've been able to surround him with talent. And they could do that because they could move off of the Trey Lance mistake without it having significant cap connotations, right, which the Broncos have. And that's why I think it has to be a young QB. I just don't think Jameis makes a whole lot of sense. Jameis would be fun. I mean, the 30 for 30 stuff. Jameis is obviously very entertaining in front of the camera, but ultimately, what's the best case scenario with a Jameis? 8. What's your ceiling? 8 wins, 9 wins max.
Well, you saw a little bit of his work in Tampa. I can tell you this, Colum. Jameis Winston came to town and couldn't get the Bucs to the playoffs. Brady comes to town, they get a touchdown. Oh, but it's the alleged GOAT. Okay, fine. Let's bring in Baker Mayfield. He gets them to the playoffs and gets a damn postseason win. So, yeah, maybe Jameis is the problem. So, I mean, now granted, I'm on record with my ACC bias plenty. I always thought Jameis Winston was a bit overrated. I was more of a Kelvin Benjamin guy. And, well, and then he didn't really pan out in the NFL either. The reasons for that, abound and could be speculated, till the cows come home. But I agree with going with the youth movement. I guess the question for me then here to kind of wrap things up is the glamorous thing, the popular thing to do is to put Bo Nix in there. And there's some positives. He's a, air quotes, Sean Payton style quarterback. He's a guy who, like Brock Purdy, may not be picked up in the 7th round, but he's a guy that played a full career and thus has a lot of experience and a lot of things under his belt. And listen, as a guy who twice covered Brock Purdy over here in Orlando with the 3-point conversion, bing, over at the depending on what it was at the time, either the Camping World Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl or whatever. I would have never said he was an NFL quarterback, but all those years of development kept him in a position where, Kyle Shanahan, who is a great coach, regardless of whatever label people want to slap him with, took him and said, hey, do what I say, you'll do okay. And to which Brock goes, okay, and now we have something. Can Bo Nix be that guy for a coach that has about as much fanfare like Sean Payton does?
No, he absolutely could be. I mean, I think that, look, I think pairing Sean Payton with a rookie QB is it could end up being a very good thing. Look, there are question marks in some ways on kind of all of these guys up to and including Caleb.
Sure.
So but we know that, and this did not come out. I mean, there was talk around it. There were tweets about it. There were articles about it at the time. Sean Payton was massively high on Patrick Mahomes. That's a reality. The Chiefs were able to get up ahead of them to get it done. And it's funny. I saw somebody who tweeted out on either the Wednesday or Thursday of that draft and said, if Sean Payton doesn't have Mahomes tonight, it's because the Chiefs have managed to get up ahead of the Saints, and so they did. That was interesting.
Not the NFC South right now. That I can't even. That blows my mind, Colum. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So I think the fact also, Kyle, that the Broncos were willing to do this now tells me that Sean Payton has identified somebody. I don't know which of them it is, but to me, it tells me that they have identified it. They've potentially had some early discussions. They feel that either they can go up and get him or that he's going to fall to them. I mean, I think Nix is a guy who it varies. Like I see, Nix goes anywhere from top 10 to second round. Chris Sims had his QB tier list come out today. He has Bo Nix at 3. He has
his credibility in my mind, but continue.
he has Drake May at 6. So I have seen everything in terms of where these guys are listed, but I do think the Broncos are going to go with a youth factor. I think they'll probably look a little bit to what the Rams did last year, just because the Rams also didn't have a whole lot of cap space. The Broncos, unfortunately, don't have the sort of ammo that the Rams did for the draft, but they're going to have to get younger. There's a couple of guys already that have been told that they won't be coming back, and I think you may see alongside the likes of Judy and Sutton, if the Broncos were to get significant draft capital for Garrett Bowles or for Justin Simmons, could they be 2 others? And I'll go one further, Kyle, and I don't like saying this because you know how I feel about the player and the person, but the Broncos could use their one and only blue chip player, Patrick Surtain, to go up in the draft. I would not be if they need to
for you. Yeah, I mean, I think
yeah.
You mentioned keeping some of those guys in house for the rebuild. I think he's one you'd need. Yeah,
I'm a massive fan of both Surtain, the player, and the person, but I will also say that a cornerback it is a finishing piece. It's not a building block, and I say that as somebody who saw Champ Bailey in Denver, and Champ was one of the best cornerbacks. I mean, we are talking one of the top 5 to play the game.
Aqib Talib, like you've seen a number of good dudes.
Yeah, we have, but Champ never got the ring. And that is just because you can shut a guy down as a cornerback, but you can't take away both sides of the field. And that's the issue that the Broncos have. They do not have the pass rush. Patrick Surtain is quite possibly, I would argue, the best man-to-man corner, and that includes L'Jarius Sneed. But the Broncos do not have the horses to get to the QB, so they've had to play zone the whole time, which kind of wastes Patrick Surtain a little bit. Yeah. And that's why I think if they had to go up, but that's only if they're going to go up. But to me, the fact that they moved off of Russ suggests that Sean knows who he wants, and he is aggressive, so he may be willing to go up. If they don't have the draft capital to do it, Patrick Surtain would be the one thing that they could waive at another team that I think almost every team in the league would take Patrick Surtain.
Well, and to your point, too, like this quarterback class is so deep. Like everybody, we were talking about this before the show. If Michael Penix falls to Denver, I think they'd live with it. For example, that's kind of where I sit. So yeah, I think you make the adequate point. Maybe you say that Sean Payton has a target, but I don't think his plan necessarily hinges on hitting that target. I don't know that he has a guy that he's that committed to, and maybe he does. We're not in the meetings yet. But I think the concept is that the youth movement, and depending on the draft, is going to be the answer for them. And you've also thrown out, begrudgingly, a potential chip that they could throw in to sweeten a pot to move up if they feel compelled to do so. And listen, I'm on record saying that among defensive, or I shouldn't say defensive, among positions on the field, the two that might be the least important, in my opinion, would be receiver, because they're a dime a dozen, and corner. But is Surtain a good enough corner to hold on to like that as a potential franchise player? Let's just put it this way. There's a team I know who had that as a model, was Xavier Howard in Miami. And how's that going? But
the other piece, Kyle, is just what they would have to pay to Pat Surtain. And again, this is a team that's not going to be very flush.
Yeah.
And the other piece is that, and you mentioned the Dolphins there. The piece, there was a stat, I think it was Brett Colum put out, that essentially it was in and around 90% of all the all-pro corners over the past 6 years have been under 30. It's a position that does not age well, because there is so much asked of you, and the league has made it so difficult for you. Like, even if Revis existed in today's NFL, it wouldn't be Revis Island anymore, because it can't be. The league makes it so you are going to get burned a time or two, and they make it so that like it is near impossible to maintain a level for like after 30. Yes, there are going to be people listening go, yeah, but what about so and so? And yeah, of course there are, right? And Gilmore has been very, very good, but ultimately, in the vast majority of cases, in 90% of cases, you drop off as a corner, as an all-pro corner beyond the age of 30. I think that's something that has to possibly factor in as well.
Listen, that stands to reason and logic. And oh, by the way, Brett Coleman on this show, all the dap. That dude's a badass. I hope to actually meet him here one day. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point you make. And all the more reason, I'm sorry, but all the more reason that it would be smart to make him part of a deal for a team desperate enough to make one. Hey, listen, I'm more than happy to send another Christmas card as a Niners fan to another team that gave up on a player too soon. Shouts to my Commanders out there, once again giving out the player that helps. But I'm more than happy to send one over to Ireland. By the way, I did appreciate your postcard that you've sent to me in the past. I'll throw you some dap for that. But yeah, hey, listen, great talk, Colum. Tell them where you are. Tell them where you are. Well, they know where you are. They know you're Colum from Cork. I said so. But tell them where you could be found, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Always enjoy chatting to you. As you mentioned, I am at Colum from Cork across social media, and I love interacting with people who enjoy football from all over the world. So do reach out, and you can find the Irish NFL show wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. And we have a couple of just spoke with Lindsay Jones, the editor from The Ringer, who covered the Broncos for many years this week. Literally, the Russ news had broken 11 minutes beforehand. So got to chat with Lindsay. And should have Bill Barnwell joining the show from ESPN next week as well. So keep an eye out for that around kind of this time next week.
So listen, this is how I know that Colum and I are getting to be friends. I didn't ask anything about high draft picks in the top 3, because then I didn't challenge him to say a TH. Everybody wins. Hey, listen, an honor, joy, and privilege to have you aboard again and making me a less ugly American with my cosmopolitan abilities to talk to those of other nations, man. I appreciate you jumping aboard, and I appreciate the Irish NFL show continuing to do good things for the NFL community. And of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as the student of the game. Check out my writing with the Jaguar Report, the Black and Gold Banneret, and the 3-point conversion. And yeah, check out my work with the Orlando Magic at A7BN Sports. And I think that's all the good stuff. Duval Dive coming up later this week. A lot of action taking place. Me and Travis Holmes have to talk about the franchising of Josh Allen and many other things. The reason why we didn't talk about it tonight is because I got to leave time for Travis. Travis deserves it. He's a champion. Of course, my guy Travis Holmes of BigCatCountry.com. Of course, check out my other work, of course, with the Huddle Up Podcasts, Sartoba Media, Captain and Company Morning Show. I do a lot of stuff, Colum. That's the punchline. But special thanks to EJ Christian for coming on the show. Thank you, of course, to Colum Cronin of Cork, Ireland, of the Irish NFL Show. But until next time, my friends, class dismissed.